So, we're calling this a vision night, and it's our third of three. And it's our vision night is kind of hitting 1/3 of each of the mission statement that is for the table, which is know God, love people, and cultivate beauty. And this one's about cultivate beauty, and that's probably the most ambiguous of them. And if you were like, what the heck does that mean? You're normal, sane, and intelligent. It's been an interesting couple of weeks, hasn't it? Like, there hasn't been much to come across the news that's been particularly beautiful. I saw a news article, I think from the Washington Post, that said that there's been a major terrorist attack somewhere in the world every single week except for 4 or 5 weeks since January 1st this year. That's insane. We have, not even across the world, but here at home in our own country, we have a problem, a systemic issue with police abuse of authority and brutality that is now being publicized and covered by the media on a level that we have not seen, or maybe are becoming aware of for the first time. And yet now we have people who are taking advantage of that angst and that frustration and anger and responding violently in ways that are not okay, not appropriate, not helpful, and just perpetuating the same problems that are plaguing our culture. Across the world, politically, we're just going to like hit all of the like inappropriate topics you're supposed to discuss at a party or something. Politically, across the world, we're seeing moves away from a welcoming acceptance of other cultures and a return to nationalism in a way we haven't seen since World War II. And it's kind of scary. So in this kind of a context, what does it mean to cultivate beauty? What does it mean to be a community that cultivates beauty? And that's kind of the question that we've been wrestling with. Frankly, it's been challenging me on a level that I haven't been used to, because my wife and I are maybe a little too prolific on social media when it comes to important social issues. And I've had to block 2 people, one of which was Hannah's childhood pastor, and the other one was a cousin, like family. And it, like, I don't like that. And I wrestled with it, and I'm still not even necessarily like 100% okay that I did that, because it goes against my mantra and desire to welcome a diversity of opinions, and to be able to have deep engagement even if you don't agree with somebody. But it got rather heated. So it's important, if we're going to talk about what does it mean to cultivate beauty in this kind of a context, to ask the question, why is all this happening in the first place? Why are we seeing, like, not just in the US, like across the world, a return to nationalism, violence on a scale that we haven't seen in a very long time? There's a great TED Talk, it was, I think, a year ago, by a guy named Mark Dunkelman. And Mark Dunkelman's TED Talk was named, "The Problem with Washington Is You." And he was referring to politics, and how we always ask, why are politics so broken? But he was actually saying it actually has a lot to do with our culture, our local levels, our neighborhoods, because politics are downstream, right? They're capitalizing on what's already there. That's not something that is shaping our culture so much as it is reacting to it. And he says this, his thesis is this. He says, in the last 2 decades, we have grown closer to our intimates, meaning those relationships that are family, very good friends, close friends, and closer with people we have never met. You know, those who are maybe geographically further away, relationally further away. Maybe you follow them on Twitter or Facebook, etc. He says, what has been lost are those middle ground relationships. The person you run into regularly at the coffee shop, or the guy down the street you talk cars with. Basically, the art of neighboring has been lost as our culture has increasingly been connected. We've been spread very, very thin as a community. Now, this has devastating effects, and I think he's onto something here. And this is what he says, that this is the effect of that very real problem. He says, there's a big chasm between thinking that the person sitting across the table from you who has a different point of view is wrong, and thinking that they are totally wackadoodle. That's his word, not mine. If they're just wrong, maybe there's a chance of working out a deal. If they're wackadoodle, there's no chance, you can't do it. And we can only assume somebody is out of their mind or crazy or somehow less than human than us if we don't actually look them in the face when we're having a conversation, when we're not actually sitting across the table from one another. So the way we've tried to reconcile this, the way we've tried to deal with this problem is we kind of avoid topics, right? Politics, sex, religion, these are the things we don't talk about in polite company. We sanitize them. We make sure that you're only allowed unless you are inclusive of all points of view and you can affirm anyone and everyone. That sounds kind of exclusive, doesn't it? It's not actually, that's just addressing the symptoms. It's not actually addressing the root of the issue, which is why can't we actually be in community and relationship with people who disagree with us, who have different points of view? Why have we started to assume that that's a weakness rather than a strength? So, one of the few bright spots in that very difficult context is this guy, Chris. And our friendship, Chris and I met 9 months ago now. It was like October last year. We're both on staff part-time at Great American Beer Festival. I'll get autographs later. And we met at an after party, a staff party for this last year's iteration of it. And you started coming to an event we do for guys who love good drink, good beer called Beard and Bottle. It's, we qualify. But Chris has very different ways of seeing the world than I do. And he is a husband, a father. He's an atheist, humanist, has a fascinating story as how he got to that point. He's a former Army combat medic. He's a trained culinary chef. There's really nothing he hasn't done. It's actually kind of embarrassing how little I've done with my life by comparison. And so we have all these very different experiences, and yet there's something that we have in common besides righteous beards. That thing that we have in common is that we are really sick of having to choose between this false dichotomy of depth of relationship and breadth of relationship. We have to choose. Our culture, our relationships, the communities that we're involved with say that you either have to choose between people who agree with you and therefore they are safe and you can go deep with them, or you can just not talk about it, you cannot engage and have more friends. We're both kind of sick of that. And we started hanging out, we started talking, and Chris has this really uncomfortable tendency to ask questions you would prefer people don't ask. And over the last 9 months or so, Chris has really become a brother to me and one of my closest friends. And we've shared many tears of joy and heartache together as well. And I hope to love people half as well as Chris does someday. So all that said, I'm going to actually hand it off to him. So what we're going to do is just kind of have, Chris is going to talk about a conversation we had that is related to this event and kind of just go back and forth because in a weird way, simultaneously, this is kind of a picture of what we at the table hope we as a community can do. And yet at the same time, this is unique to us and also not without problems and challenges as well. So it's not like we've arrived and this is perfect and y'all just kind of figure it out and do it our way. It's more like, man, this is awesome and we want to share and invite other people into it because it's been just an amazing kind of journey so far. So, yeah.
So I can't promise to be half as eloquent as Brad because he's a hell of a guy. And I think that he summed up the way our friendship first got started really well, about 9 months ago. And after party, there was this dude who was just sort of this bright point of light who was very talkative and very engaging. And I sat down and started talking with him, and he was talking about his experiences in life, and he and I were just really connected well, and we found out we lived in the same town. I was like, that's crazy.
He knew a guy named Brad?
Yeah. No. He was Brad, but thank you, Mr. Humble McHumbleson. And Brad invited me to this event called Beard and Bottles, and I was like, yeah, that sounds rad. And so I show up, and it was just this community of incredible guys. And that night, I think Brad and I ended up talking into the wee hours of the night.
2:30 a.m.
2:30 a.m. because I asked one of those really inconvenient sort of questions that sparked off a whole conversation. And then I think Brad was like, hey, so why don't we follow this up in a couple weeks? And we started following up conversations where we could just talk about, so here's what I believe. And Brad would respond with like, okay, well, here's kind of where I'm at. And we let that flow. And it led to him talking about how he's at this point of planting a church here in town. And I was like, that's awesome. That's great. Congratulations. I'm so happy
that you thought that. Yeah.
Were you?
A little bit, yeah. That's not normally most people who aren't like already part of a church excited about it. It's just, that's pretty cool.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
But later. But I was stoked, and I was like, that's awesome. And what can I do to help you? Because I want to help you, because you're my friend. And that inevitably led into him being like, hey, would you talk at one of these vision nights? And I was like, yes, sure. Back in my mind, I was like, I have no idea what I would talk about. I feel totally unprepared to talk at something like this, because I am the worst person to talk at something like this, but okay. And then like for 2 weeks, I was in agony, like emotional agony. Because I realized like, even though by this point, Brad and I had this really strong friendship, there was a big part of my life that I hadn't shared with Brad yet. That I realized like, if I don't share this with Brad, there could be some serious complications. And I know you're shaking. You already know the punchline, so you stop shaking your head. But I was like, I've got to talk to Brad. So the next time he and I got together and we were sitting down pouring beers, I was crushed. I was devastated. And I was like, Brad, I need to ask for your forgiveness. And Brad was totally confused. And I was like, Brad, there's a part of my life that I have not been honest with you about. I've not been forthcoming about. And I need to do that with you because you're my friend, and I need to do that with you because it could have serious long-term complications. And at that point, I was like, Brad, there's a part of my relationships that you need to know about, and that's that I'm polyamorous. Now, guys, for those of you that don't know what that is, don't get hung up on the Latin and the Greek roots being mashed together. That's the least part of that you need to be confused about.
I think there are some grammar nerds. That was a good
right?
anticipation.
Yeah.
Good.
For those of you that don't know what that is, I am happy to talk about that later. That's the least part of it, but it's that I have multiple partners in my life. And I realize that if I'm going to be talking in a major aspect, if I'm going to be involved in this church, I don't want any part of my life to be hidden that could compromise part of your church, that could undermine what you're building. And I'm sorry, I want to ask for your forgiveness. And I wanted to give Brad the chance to basically rescind that invitation to have me speak. Because I didn't want to do anything that could hurt what Brad was building. And I just felt agony over this, not because of anything, but like I valued Brad's friendship, but I realized that this could be something that could damage my friendship with him. This could be something that could damage the church that he was building. This could do a lot of bad. And I was scared. So.
It was a little bit, I don't remember if I actually laughed when you said that, but I actually was tempted to, because I was simultaneously relieved, giddy, and angry. I was relieved because I was like, oh God, what is he talking about? Did he murder somebody? and even like, if I understand the gospel the way I do, like, that's okay as long as people know about that and you've like served your time and like, and that's not like unresolved in some way. You know, that still wasn't a deal breaker, but I'm like, what in the world in this guy's mind could somehow disqualify you from talking about community and grace and relationship and friendship, and so I was relieved in that sense. I was giddy because I'm like, are you kidding me? This is what we're talking about. Like this is the vision night, because and this leads into why I was angry, is the fact that you had to even be afraid of that pissed me off. Like that made me so angry that, and I understood it. Like the church has done in many ways a terrible job loving people well, and polyamory is something that like you probably don't know many people. Chris is the first person I've met who is polyamorous. I had no idea what that meant. He asked me if I knew what it meant, and I'm like, I know enough to know that people define it very differently. Beyond that, I have no idea. And it would be very reasonable for Chris to be afraid to talk to like a Christian pastor. Like that's legit, and it made me angry that was legit, because it shouldn't be. And I think I responded to you and said something along the lines of like, I'd be the biggest hypocrite you knew if that actually changed my mind, rather than making me want you to do that more. So yeah.
Now, as Brad will attest, I'm a very stoic person.
As stoic as I am serious.
Right. Yeah. No, I was, of course, crying profusely at this point. And it made me reflect of like, okay, if that is part of what community is, then okay, like I'm totally on board. Like I'm going to throw myself into that and like really reflect on when I'm involving myself in this community, because there's multiple beard and bottles beyond this, and like what does it mean to engage on this community? And you know, I was thinking about like, well, what is this? What is the whole point of this night, and about cultivating beauty? And like, you don't hear about people like cultivating cows. Like you don't hear about like no one ever was like, I'm a proud cow cultivator. Like,
You never know, dude.
You might.
It's Boulder.
It is Boulder. It's Boulder County. They might cultivate cows, not raise cows, but no.
Yeah.
Like you cultivate plants, right? And I was thinking about it and like, well, what in particular represents like community to me in particular? And I thought about trees, okay? And in particular, there are three ways that a tree grows. A tree grows up, it grows down, and grows out, okay? And the purpose of a community really is represented best, in my mind at least, by a tree. So when a tree grows down, right, it plants its roots and it gets deeper and stronger by planting those roots. It helps to support the ground around it, right? The ground is given support and structure and grows stronger for those roots. As the tree grows up, as some of you are very fantastically living this analogy right now, it provides shade, right? It gives shelter from the harsh sun, from rain and snow and driving weather, right? And then as it grows bigger for all that, right, you can see the history of its growth. As more is built into it, it expands, right? So I thought about like, well, what else happens underneath all that, right? As other plants are planted closer to that, like they benefit from that. As they are planted close to it, they can survive better because of the structure of those roots, right? They're protected from hail and horrible snow and rain because that tree has sheltered it, right? That community, as it grows bigger, will be able to outreach more. It can support more. It can protect more, right? And you can watch as that community grows. If you look at any tree, as you look at its history, you can see the history of a tree's rings. You can see maybe when an errant kid was running by and swinging a sword or whatever, or play sword, and banged off a piece of the bark. And that community maybe took some damage or whatever. But the tree survived and grew around that, right? So I thought about all that and I looked at, well, like, who else in this community, apart from Brad, who, I've learned a heck of a lot from Brad, but who else in this community have I touched? Who else has their shade protected me from? I think of Todd, right? Who I've had the benefit of incredible friendship, incredible learning, right? I can look around just in this crowd and I see countless faces already where this community has touched me and supported me and helped me learn. And some of that's the benefit of, just this small town where, like, every single time I've come to Beard and Bottle, like, there are so many hands I can shake. But then I see you in the 4th of July Park, or I see you at Wonderland Brewing. And I can experience the joy of just knowing that shade and those roots, right, in the community, right? I know the joy of my daughter playing with the community's children, right? And so I thought about how is that community, how are those trees and roots, how are they a catalyst for the flourishing of the community? How can you build that tree to help your community to do that? How can you continue that and look at that as, well, what are you doing to build, right? What shade are you providing that maybe you don't even know about? The leaves on this tree probably don't know what plant underneath it's protecting from hail or rain, but it's there, right? So
I think we can stop.
right, we're done. Right there, touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, I love hearing you talk about that because at every analogy and every image that you're describing, I'm thinking of like Ken and I's own experience with this community and also with your friendship and, being there when I get certain news on the phone that is exciting. And when we were talking about this and trying to think through, like, okay, what in the world are we going to say at this event? I'm going to stand up too. When we're talking about shade, when we're talking about protection, what is it that we actually mean with it? And this is the definition that Chris and I came up with: is shade is a community that is a catalyst for flourishing, and all that entails. And that's a huge vision. That's a huge picture. I think I'm really actually struggling to follow that because I think that describes it beautifully. So part of the vision for the table and the reason why we have the name the table, there's a tree in my mom's backyard growing up. It was a huge, like 40, 50 foot tall American pin oak. And my brother and I, when we were growing up, swung from a one rope swing from there. And it got several years ago, contracted some kind of a fungus and it started to die. And my stepdad, my brother and I, we chopped down the tree, we quartered it, we planked it, we kiln dried it. And this table right here actually is the result of that work. This tree that was a good thing and was kind of part of my life growing up and everything is now one of the most powerful catalysts for flourishing and for community in our home. Like that's kind of it's a really powerful image. There's something about breaking bread and sitting across from somebody, sharing good drink and good conversation that precludes anybody from being a wackadoodle, right? You can't sit across from somebody and think this person is somehow less than human, or at least be a sane, rational person. Yeah. So I think when we talk about this being a community, when we use the word, Chris used the word church, I have in the Evite that we take Jesus seriously and ourselves lightly. And to unpack that a little bit, what we mean by that is this, that Jesus understood that community, that sitting across from a table, hospitality in general, is a powerful catalyst for community and human flourishing. One of the most powerful descriptions of his love is he actually describes at a table with people, with his friends, with his 12 closest friends, when he breaks bread and he says, "This is me, broken for you." He pours out wine. He says, "This is my blood shed for you." This love is so severe and so true for him that he's willing to give himself over for it. That kind of sacrificial, unconditional love, he chooses the last night of his life before being crucified, he chooses to communicate with food at a table. I think that's pretty profound. And so just as a tree died, and yes, I'm maybe forcing an analogy here a little bit, but just as a tree died and was resurrected into a table, right? As a catalyst for flourishing in our home, Jesus died to give life and create flourishing in the world. And I actually believe, and this is one of those weird false dichotomies that I really want to bust with like all my heart and soul, is that I truly believe that the more serious we are about Jesus and who he was, the more we will love our neighbors ourselves. The more conservative we are in our theology, the knowledge of God, the more liberal we will be in our love for people. You don't hear that very often in our world. You feel like you have to pick a side or a tribe, and we're both sick of that. Yeah. We believe that the most effective way to cultivate flourishing, to cultivate beauty, is, or at least I believe, I say we, but I didn't want to include you in that.
That's fair.
Okay, is the church, and that's a vehicle for flourishing. So as I say that, like, whether you've been in the church your whole life or you've never been in the church, like, I know, because you're intelligent, sane people, that you're thinking about all the ways the church has royally screwed up. And you're right. And there's a lot that needs to be repented of for that. There's a lot that needs to be owned by that by the church. I don't want you to hear, like, I myself did not grow up in the church at all. I found it to be kind of a definite joke that I literally made fun of people about. And I don't want you to hear, as I'm saying this, that we're going to do it perfect. We're going to do it better. We're going to make church great again. And I really hope that hurt you as much as it did me. I could barely even get it out.
Good. I'm proud of you. I knew you could do it.
Thanks. He knew I was going to say that. And honestly, that kind of triumphalism is part of the problem. That's part of the reason why, if you've had a bad experience of the church, you are right to have had a bad experience of the church, because that in of itself is a denial of our need for grace. To say that we can do this perfectly, that we do not have a need for something outside of ourselves to love people well, is actually pretty arrogant and prideful. And if, again, whether you've been in the church your entire life or you've never set foot in one, you probably understand exactly what I'm talking about. So we will fail. Chris knows that. We've failed already. I've had foot and mouth syndrome on more than one occasion.
Brother.
But our hope is that a community that's actually founded on the forgiveness of God is going to be able to, number one, forgive one another, but also own that we have a need to be forgiven by others and a need to be forgiven by our neighbors as well. That's, like, if there's anything I can think of that is of utter absolute vital importance, it's that. Because that cultivates the humility and the confidence to risk in our love for people well. So, you don't have to believe the tree story I told. By the way, it is true. I did swing from a one rope swing from this 50-foot American pin oak in my mom's backyard. But you don't have to believe that story to sit at this table, right? You don't have to actually have been there or experienced that story to be true. In the same way, you don't have to believe in Jesus to belong at this table either, this community. And that's, I hope, what Chris is describing. There's a guy in New York. He's a pastor. If you hang around me even longer than 5 minutes, I will talk about him a lot. His name's Tim Keller. He just on Facebook, like, it's not tweeted, what's posted, that
tweeted it on Facebook.
you can say tweet on Facebook. Thank you. I'm really good with technology. He said that there's no such thing as a truly inclusive community because everyone is exclusive of those people who are themselves exclusive. So the problem, therefore, is not that we're not inclusive enough in our beliefs. It's that everyone has exclusive beliefs. The question is which exclusive beliefs promote the most inclusive behavior. And I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian, and we're doing this because we believe that Christianity, the gospel, and we can talk a lot about more of that later, is the most powerful catalyst for that. But if you don't believe that, if you're like, that's a joke, awesome. You actually get to help us prove that we're practicing what we preach. Because if it's not true and you feel unwelcome here, we're full of crap. And please test us. I'm going to wince in advance. So when we say that you don't have to believe in order to belong, that's basically how we're trying to articulate an unconditional love that provides this kind of relational shelter and space, this shade for flourishing for all people, anyone who is planted near our roots, whether that's geographically, relationally, vocationally, familially, however you define that. Our hope as a community, our vision for the table is that all would be welcome, all would be shown hospitality, and that you would flourish whether you believe or not. And that's awesome. You're welcome here. So, do you want to say anything else about that, or?
Polish that one off nicely, yeah.
You sure?
But yeah, no. I got no follow up. You locked that one down, brother.
Okay. That worries me.
You got that.
So
You did fine.
So, big overview of just some, okay, what now? What does all that mean? Because this is definitely a conversation we want to host, and we don't want to just talk about this. We actually are going to have some time for everybody to participate that very concretely and practically, and more on that in a second. But if you want to talk more about this, come find me. If you are interested in just in a very safe way being kept abreast of what's going on, you'd like to receive an email or something, there's a laptop set up over there where you can put your information in, and we're not going to send you spam, at least not more than the next person. We could be Facebook friends. That's more than enough spam for everybody, I think. And then we're going to launch a monthly worship gathering at EASTMENT Coffee Company on August 14th. So if you're at all interested in that, we'd love to have you. That's going to grow and progress, and we're already a little bit nervous about growing out of our space on the first day, so that's going to be great. But that's my problem. And then, so Anderson's, raise your hand. So if you live south of 470 in Broomfield or Thornton, these two are starting we're calling them a community group, which is basically an opportunity for people who live in their area to be more locally focused, gathered around a community meal, and just have a good time. And they're awesome. We've known them for a very long time, at least comparatively in Colorado. They're wonderful people. And then Massman's over here. If you're north of 470, Lafayette, Erie, Louisville, they're doing the same thing at their house. I'd encourage you to connect with them or the Andersons. Massman's, Andersons, that would be awesome. So, two things on how to kind of respond to all this and to continue to participate in this. The first thing is over underneath the porch here, there's a whiteboard, and it has a question written on it. How can the table be a shade tree in your community? I don't care whether you've known me for a long time, if you've just showed up here tonight, you don't know anybody else here. There's a bunch of sticky pads next to that on the bar with some pens. We'd love to hear your answers to that. What would it look like for a church it to be a blessing, to cultivate flourishing and beauty in your community? And I don't care if you believe or you don't, or you're convinced or you're not. We want to know your opinion, because it's absolutely going to inform what we do. Otherwise, we're just talking right now. The second thing is, okay, if Daniel handed you pens and paper and stuff at your table, raise your hand. Okay, I don't think you know what that was for. Did you guys get some? Okay, cool. Anybody here? You guys? Okay, one at each table. There are 3 questions on a half sheet of paper that we wrote out. Can I borrow one? I forgot to grab one. Yep. Describe a time when you needed shade and or someone, either a person or a community, provided it. Number 2, what would a church where you don't have to believe in order to belong look like? And number 3, what immediate need for, quote, relational shelter and space to flourish, how we would define shade, do you see among your neighbors? And we would encourage everyone at your respective tables, you can get up, go grab some more food, go grab some more beer, help yourself. But we want to not just sit here and talk up here at you. We actually want this to be an active thing. And whoever it is that are passing these out and kind of a little bit leading that discussion, they're going to be writing notes because we actually want to know. We're not just saying that. And your answers may very much inform what we do as a community. I mean, Chris's input has informed a lot of what we do. And anyone and everyone is invited into that. So, cool. Jump in, enjoy, grab more beer. Chris and I are going to eat. Cool.